This is a narco tunnel. It's dark, dangerous, but it's highly lucrative.
What if the real war on drugs isn't happening in the streets, but far beneath your feet? Hidden under Colombia's jungles, cities, and borderlands is a secret world few have seen and even fewer survive. A maze of narco tunnels, some stretching for miles, silently moves billions in cocaine, weapons, and bodies. These are not simple smuggling routes. They are underground strongholds, escape hatches, torture chambers, mass graves, and recently, something even more chilling was found: shackles made for children. Who built them? What were they used for? And how many more are still hidden below? This isn't just a story about drugs. It's about the architecture of terror and the underground empire no government dares claim. The subterranean empire, narco tunnels, and the war beneath Colombia's soil, beneath the verdant landscapes and bustling cities of Colombia. A dark, dangerous, yet incredibly lucrative world exists, a hidden network of narco tunnels. These aren't mere holes in the ground. They are sophisticated, reinforced passages stretching for miles under rivers, roads, and even international checkpoints. Imagine stepping into one. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and fear, the darkness absolute, and the claustrophobia overwhelming. It's a terrifying testament to the ingenuity and ruthlessness of the cartels, a constant reminder that the war on drugs is fought not just on the streets, but deep within the earth itself. For decades, cartels have exploited these subterranean highways, moving tons of cocaine and other illicit substances worth billions of dollars. But recent discoveries reveal a far more sinister truth. These tunnels are not just conduits for drugs. They are prisons of fear, hidden arsenals, and even macabre burial grounds, exposing crimes far worse than mere drug trafficking. The origins of a subterranean empire, the brutal cocaine wars that tore Colombia apart in the 1980s. On one side stood Pablo Escobar, the fearsome leader of the Medellin cartel, who built his empire through terror, assassinations, car bombs, and widespread bribery. He controlled the flow of cocaine into the United States, a dominion he would fiercely defend. Opposing him were the equally ruthless, yet more discreet Cali cartel, who used their immense wealth and connections to challenge Escobar's dominance. Caught in this bloody crossfire were the Colombian government and USDA agents, striving to dismantle both cartels amidst an explosion of street violence. It was in this crucible of conflict that Escobar discovered a new, unconventional weapon, the very ground beneath their feet. Inspired by the Viet Cong's elaborate Q-Chi tunnels during the Vietnam War, a network that turned the earth itself into an enemy for American soldiers, Escobar became obsessed. He meticulously studied military reports and diagrams, envisioning a similar network in Colombia, where his forces could strike and vanish without a trace. He believed that the earth could conceal his empire, offering an unparalleled level of security. Beneath barns, jungle compounds, and unassuming warehouses, men began to dig. These early tunnels were crude, little more than filthy, rotting pits shored up by flimsy planks, but they served their purpose. Within these hidden depths, cocaine was stacked like bricks of death, millions in cash were buried like corpses, and gunmen could disappear the moment police raids commenced. Escobar's conviction in this strategy was further solidified by reports of Mexican traffickers already digging crude tunnels under the U.S. border, successfully smuggling shipments while authorities searched above. For Escobar, this was irrefutable proof of the strategy's efficacy. He saw dirt as a more loyal and effective weapon than any gunman who could betray him or smuggler who could be arrested. A tunnel, once dug, remained silent and steadfast. The first Medellin tunnels were terrifying in their crudeness. Dug by hand with basic tools, they featured trapdoors hidden under livestock pens and chambers packed with drugs, saturating the air with chemical fumes. When police raided, cartel soldiers would simply drop into these subterranean passages, leaving behind empty rooms and an eerie silence that taunted the authorities. Law enforcement found themselves battling ghosts, searching seemingly ordinary farms and factories while a monstrous, hidden city was silently taking shape beneath them. The Cali cartel, observing Escobar's success, took the concept and elevated its depravity. Their engineers eschewed rotting wood for poured concrete, rigged sophisticated ventilation systems, and built spaces where men could breathe and wait for hours without surfacing. The human cost of these constructions was monstrous. Diggers, often coerced into the work, were reportedly buried alive when the soil collapsed or suffocated in the total blackness, their bodies forever sealed within the earth. For the cartels, the dead were merely part of the foundation, each corpse feeding the relentless expansion of their underground empire. Evolution and engineering beyond simple burrows. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the rudimentary burrows of Escobar's era were no longer sufficient. Colombian cartels, now significantly richer and their logistics far more complex, faced relentless pressure from law enforcement and U.S. agencies. This escalating pressure forced traffickers to think bigger, transforming their tunnels from mere escape routes or storage holes into fully engineered structures designed to rival military installations. Engineers, architects, and experienced miners were quietly recruited, often under the guise of legitimate construction projects. Some were enticed by exorbitant sums of money, while others were threatened into offering their expertise. Entire teams worked in rotating shifts, sometimes digging for months before even reaching a workable structure. These modern tunnels were reinforced with concrete, equipped with lighting systems powered by stolen electricity, and fitted with crude but functional ventilation that kept air circulating for hours. Many tunnels were not just straight passages but sprawling complexes with multiple exits leading into houses, barns, or even rivers. Some were wide enough to accommodate motorcycles, allowing for rapid transport of loads from one end to another. Accounts describe certain passageways stretching for over a kilometer, connecting rural jungle camps to urban safe houses. The secrecy surrounding their construction was brutally enforced. Workers were frequently locked underground for days, forced to dig and reinforce in silence. Those who attempted to quit rarely resurfaced alive. Local rumors spoke of men disappearing after assisting the cartels, their families too terrified to ask questions, a testament to the cartels' ruthless protection of these clandestine projects. By the early 1990s, Colombian security forces began to accumulate undeniable evidence. Informants spoke of trapdoors under floors, and raids ended with suspects mysteriously vanishing, leaving police staring at empty rooms. Trucks entered cartel compounds and never re-emerged. Gradually, authorities realized that the cartels were literally digging into the ground and disappearing. Once this horrifying truth became apparent, the nature of the raids changed dramatically. Police units arrived armed not only with rifles but with sledgehammers, shovels, and drills, prepared to smash through floors and pursue these men into the dangerous, uncharted depths. Weapons, caches, and war rooms, the militarization of the underground. When authorities first breached Narco tunnels in the 1990s, they anticipated finding caches of cocaine, bundles of cash, or smuggled goods. What they actually discovered sickened even hardened soldiers. Beneath seemingly ordinary streets and farmland were hidden chambers that resembled underground military bases. Crates of rifles and stacks of grenades filled these rooms. Heavy weapons lay in piles, ready for immediate deployment. These were not temporary stashes, they were arsenals prepared for war. One raid near Cali in the mid-1990s exposed rooms lined with boxes of AK-47s and ammunition stacked shoulder high. Soldiers later confessed that they had never witnessed such a concentration of firepower outside of official army storage facilities. Other raids unearthed rocket-propelled grenades and improvised explosives, weapons designed to rip apart armored vehicles, shred human bodies, and destroy entire buildings. Investigators soon realized these were more than just storage areas. They were fortified command centers where cartel leaders and lieutenants could hide and operate while police searched fruitlessly above them. In 2001, a raid near Cali revealed a chamber that was more bunker than tunnel. It was equipped with radios, encrypted phones, and wall maps detailing routes, targets, and planned ambush points. Bunks were pushed against the walls, and shelves were stocked with enough food and supplies to sustain fighters underground for weeks. Captured operatives later confirmed what the raid suggested. Orders to ambush Colombian police convoys had been issued from these very bunkers. Seized documents in 2004 described how hits were meticulously synchronized with drug shipments, stretching security forces to their breaking point. Convoys were obliterated by explosives, and survivors were executed where they lay. Attacks were timed to ensure maximum bloodshed, allowing drug shipments to pass unhindered. The psychological impact on Colombian forces was devastating. They understood then that they were not fighting small-time gangs, but well-organized armies. The sheer scale of planning and firepower exceeded anything many commanders had ever encountered. Officers admitted that the sophistication of these underground networks shocked them more than any firefight, creating a deep-seated fear that armed enemies could be operating in silence right beneath their feet. And wherever weapons flowed into these hidden spaces, violence, in its most depraved forms, inevitably followed. The disturbing evidence of torture and death as Colombian authorities dug deeper into narco tunnels in the late 1990s, they uncovered scenes that left even hardened officers profoundly shaken. Some tunnels concealed prison-like chambers reeking of dampness, rot, and unspeakable human misery. Inside, crude wooden doors sealed narrow rooms no wider than a few feet. Iron shackles, stained black with rust from sweat and blood, were bolted into the walls. Forensic teams later confirmed what the first soldiers already knew. These tunnels had been used as detention and torture sites, not to hold people safely for ransom, but to break them. Many of the bodies recovered inside or nearby corroborated this grim reality. Some were unceremoniously dumped into shallow pits dug directly within the tunnels, soil hastily scraped over them, leaving arms and legs horrifyingly exposed. Autopsies revealed shattered bones, broken teeth, and close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Victims had been beaten, tied, and executed in conditions so degrading that investigators struggled to document their findings. The victims were not chosen at random. Many were cartel foot soldiers suspected of being informants, while others were rivals captured in territorial disputes. Disturbingly, records also indicated that civilians who had stumbled across tunnel entrances were taken inside and never reappeared. In rural Antioquia, farmers vanished after refusing to allow tunneling beneath their land, leaving their families with no answers, only silence and unsettling rumors of bodies hidden in the earth. Testimonies from former cartel operatives who later cooperated with prosecutors added details so disturbing they were difficult to verify, yet they chillingly matched the physical evidence. Some described executions carried out in front of other prisoners to instill terror. Victims were sometimes forced to kneel and beg for mercy while their captors mocked them before delivering fatal shots. Others recalled prisoners tied to chairs and beaten with blunt weapons until they confessed to supposed betrayals. In at least one account, the lives of prisoners were taken slowly with burns from heated metal rods pressed into their skin. Unverified but persistent reports claim that tunnels near Medellin contained dedicated torture areas. Investigators found metal chairs wired with electrical cables. Witnesses described captives being shocked repeatedly until they passed out, only to be revived and shocked again. Prosecutors also collected testimony that some tunnels bore carved symbols on the walls where these acts took place. Photographs showed marks and scratches consistent with knives and crude tools, though their meaning was never explained. Many officers admitted later that these discoveries left them with nightmares and a deep sense of rage. But the tunnels held more than torture sites. Hidden within them were escape routes that allowed cartel leaders to vanish the moment authorities closed in. The escape routes nobody knew about for law enforcement in Colombia. One of the most frustrating realities of the narco wars was the uncanny ability of cartel targets to vanish into thin air, even when surrounded. Investigators later pieced together that these sudden disappearances were the result of ingeniously hidden escape tunnels. Trapdoors dropped into passageways stretching hundreds of meters, emerging in empty fields where getaway cars or trucks awaited. Authorities also discovered that entrances inside houses were disguised with remarkable perfection. Some tunnels opened under barns that appeared completely normal from the outside. Pull up the floorboards, however, and a gaping hole led to a hidden passage. Others were tucked under wells that seemed like ordinary water sources, but concealed ladders descending into the darkness. Even more disturbing, authorities found routes hidden beneath septic tanks filled with human waste. Soldiers had to navigate through the filth before realizing the tanks were merely a cover for a clean tunnel that went deeper underground. In rural areas, fake animal pens were built over tunnel mouths, with pigs or goats living above, their sounds and smells masking the activity of men moving below. In city houses, trapdoors were cut into tiled kitchen floors with such precision that even trained search dogs initially missed them. The most shocking discoveries came in the early 2000s when abandoned tunnels were found beneath small rural churches. Whispers spread that some priests had allowed the digging in exchange for cartel bribes or protection. While no hard proof ever emerged, the mere idea was enough to profoundly rattle entire communities. Even years later, people struggled to view those churches in the same light. For locals, the sense of violation was unbearable. Families living above farms or homes where tunnels were later uncovered admitted they never slept soundly again. Parents told investigators they had allowed their children to play in barns or yards, completely unaware that cartel fighters were moving beneath their feet. Farmers expressed their anger and fear after learning that their livestock pens had been used as cover for escape routes. One woman near Antioquia recounted years of drawing water from a well that secretly concealed a ladder leading down into cartel tunnels. For many, this profound sense of betrayal was worse than the raids themselves, as their land and homes had been unwittingly turned into camouflage for killers. The most famous example of these escape routes occurred in 1992 when Colombian forces closed in on a farmhouse outside Medellin. Intelligence suggested that key members of Escobar's network were hiding inside. Troops moved swiftly, surrounding the property, confident their targets had nowhere to go. Yet, upon breaching the house, they found empty rooms. Moments later, scouts reported figures emerging from a hillside nearly half a mile away. Escobar's men had escaped through a tunnel that began in the farmhouse cellar and exited in the countryside. That single episode humiliated the security forces and reinforced Escobar's legend as a man who could never be trapped. The shifting sands. From Colombia to the U.S. border, that legend, however, finally ended the following year. On December 2, 1993, Pablo Escobar was shot dead on a rooftop in Medellin after a long and arduous manhunt. His death marked the collapse of the Medellin cartel, already weakened by arrests and relentless pressure. Not long after, the Cali cartel, which had risen in Escobar's shadow, was dismantled in 1995 and 1996 with the capture of its leaders, the Rodriguez-Orejuela brothers. By the late 1990s, Colombia's two most powerful cartels had been broken, but the cocaine trade did not cease. Instead, power shifted north. Mexican cartels stepped into the vacuum, taking over much of the trafficking into the United States during the late 1990s and 2000s. As their influence expanded, they began collaborating with Mexican groups to extend tunnels across borders, creating subterranean highways of cocaine that reached deep into the United States. The first major discovery on the U.S. border came in 1990 near Douglas, Arizona. What appeared to be a normal warehouse in the Mexican town of Agua Prieta concealed the mouth of a tunnel running straight into the United States. It was approximately 300 feet long, reinforced with wooden beams, and fitted with lights and ventilation. Agents were stunned. Though crude compared to what would follow, it demonstrated the cartel's unwavering determination. They were no longer merely slipping past patrols, they were digging highways under the border itself. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, these passageways became far more advanced. Some stretched for thousands of feet, tall enough for men to walk upright, and were equipped with electric lighting. Others had pumps to drain water and ventilation fans to maintain air circulation. Several even featured rails with small carts to move cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine in bulk. One of the most infamous was uncovered in 2006 in Otay Mesa, California. It ran for over 400 feet, starting beneath a warehouse in Tijuana and surfacing under a storage facility in San Diego. Authorities who entered it compared it to a military operation. This was not a temporary hole in the ground, it was a fully engineered pipeline of crime. Legitimate-looking businesses often served to disguise the entrances. Warehouses, trucking depots, and food distribution facilities were popular covers. On the U.S. side, investigators entered buildings that seemed ordinary, some stacked with produce boxes, only to discover hidden trapdoors in the floors that dropped into dark passageways. In one case, what appeared to be a refrigerated food storage unit contained a false wall that led directly into a tunnel shaft. Every new tunnel discovery sent waves of panic through U.S. agencies. If such elaborate systems had gone undetected for months, it raised the alarming question of how many others remained in use. Reports from cartel defectors claimed that several tunnels were never found at all and remained active for years. Locals living near the border told stories of faint grinding noises beneath industrial zones at night, though these claims were never definitively verified. The darkest rumors came from former cartel operatives who spoke about the brutal construction methods. Some claimed migrant workers were recruited under false promises of construction jobs, only to be forced into digging for weeks or months in suffocating conditions. Others suggested that disobedient cartel foot soldiers were punished by being sent to dig until collapse or death, their bodies buried in the very earth they were forced to carve out. None of these reports could be definitively proven, but the mere possibility haunted investigators. Yet, as sophisticated as these underground highways were, what shocked investigators most was not the engineering itself. It was what some of the newest discoveries revealed, pulling the tunnels out of the past and into the present with horrors that went far beyond mere smuggling. The recent exposure's horrors unveiled in 2021. Medellin police acted on intelligence pointing to an unfinished narco tunnel hidden beneath a farm on the city's outskirts. From above, the site appeared ordinary, but when officers pried open the concealed entrance and began their descent, the horror began immediately. The air was heavy and stale, so thick that several men reported struggling to breathe. It carried the unmistakable smell of damp earth mixed with rot. Their flashlights revealed a narrow corridor lined with crude brickwork. The ground was uneven, loose dirt shifting under their boots. But what stopped the team cold were the restraints fixed into the walls. These were not standard shackles for adult prisoners, they were small, bolted metal cuffs set at ankle height. The size left little doubt they were meant for children. The officers froze. The silence that followed was not confusion, but profound shock. The only reason to restrain children in such a place would be to prevent them from escaping. The cuffs were at ankle height because the victims were either kept sitting on the floor or forced into positions where they could not move freely. Investigators understood instantly what this meant. These tunnels had not just been built to move drugs. They had also been used to hold trafficked children underground in brutal and degrading conditions. The implication was horrifying. The shackles suggested children were kept there for extended periods, possibly while being moved through trafficking networks or while awaiting sale, ransom, or coercion into cartel service. Testimony from past trafficking cases in Colombia confirmed that minors were sometimes forced into smuggling work or used as leverage against their families. Forensic teams could not yet determine how many had been kept in that tunnel, but the restraints left no doubt that children were imprisoned there against their will. Worse still, the proximity of burial pits nearby raised another unspoken fear among investigators. The children who were restrained in those tunnels may not have been released at all. Some of the bones being examined could have belonged to them. For police and forensic staff, it was one of the most disturbing discoveries of their careers. It showed that the tunnels were not only a system of smuggling, they were also a system of captivity where even the most vulnerable victims were chained to the walls and left in the dark. As they pressed deeper, the atmosphere grew even more unsettling. Weak electric wiring had been strung along the ceiling, feeding dim bulbs that flickered constantly. The tunnel felt unstable, as if it could collapse at any moment, and the only sounds were the scuff of boots and the steady drip of water falling from the ceiling into shallow puddles. Several officers later admitted they felt a rising dread that made them want to turn back. Alongside the horror, the tunnels still served their original purpose. Suitcases stuffed with cash were pulled out from hidden compartments. Gold bars, luxury watches, and packets of narcotics were stacked in chambers carved into the walls. Investigators also uncovered unfinished sections that revealed active construction. Reinforced beams and fresh cement bags proved that workers had abandoned their posts only hours before the raid. According to some reports, police dogs picked up scents that suggested recent human activity, meaning the raiders may have narrowly missed capturing cartel operatives. These tunnels were not relics from the days of Escobar or even from the partnerships with Mexican cartels. They were active and evolving, transforming into hidden worlds of horror beneath Colombia's soil, starkly reminding everyone that the war against narco empires was still being fought. Colombian officials admit today that despite decades of raids and demolitions, hundreds of passageways remain undiscovered. Each one could hold weapons, prisoners, or graves. Each one is proof that after all the blood spilled and all the victories claimed, the cartels still own parts of the country no government can reach. The war beneath Colombia's soil isn't over. It's just been hidden. Narco tunnels stretch for miles, carrying drugs, weapons, and human suffering in silence. From torture chambers to child-sized shackles, what's been uncovered isn't just criminal.